a stone the size of a walnut. That's all it took to bring down the most feared warrior in the valley. But the real question isn't whether it happened. The real question is why everyone still gets the story wrong. You're standing on a dry slope in the middle of a valley. The sun beats down on loose gravel. Two armies face each other across a shallow creek bed. On one side, a man steps forward. He's tall, not myth tall, but tall enough. Broad chest, bronze plates stitched to thick leather, a spear so heavy it takes both hands to throw. His voice rips through the air, and the sound alone makes grown men step back. On the other side, a boy with a leather pouch and a smooth river stone. No shield, no helmet, no sword. And here's what no one tells you. That boy was the most deadly person on the field. To understand why, you have to forget the version you learned as a child. Forget the stained glass windows. Forget the flannel boards in Sunday school. And look at what was actually in his hand. A sling is not a slingshot. It's not a toy. It's a weapon that turns the human arm into a launcher. 2 cords, a leather pouch, and a stone. You swing it in a wide arc above your head. The pouch holds the stone until the moment you release one cord. Then physics takes over. The stone leaves the pouch at the outer edge of the arc, and all that built-up speed transfers into one small, dense object flying in a straight line. A trained slinger could push that stone to speeds that would stun you. We know this because a team in England strapped sensors to expert slingers and measured every throw. The fastest stones left the pouch faster than a pro baseball pitch. But speed alone doesn't tell the full story. What matters is what happens when that stone hits something. And this is where the sling stops looking simple. A stone at that speed carries roughly the same punch as a crossbow bolt from the Middle Ages. So picture this. A boy with a rope and a rock was putting out the same force as a weapon it took master craftsmen months to build. The sling wasn't a backup. It wasn't a last resort. It was a first-strike tool hiding in plain sight. But here's what should bother you. If the sling was that good, why did Goliath bother wearing armor at all? Bronze armor in that era was not what you see in movies. No full plate from head to toe. No gleaming suits of metal. Warriors wore hammered bronze scales, stitched onto fabric or leather. Each scale was thin, less than the width of 2 stacked coins. This armor worked well against swords. A slash from a bronze blade would skid across the scales. Even a spear thrust could be turned aside if the angle was steep enough. Bronze armor was built for the kind of fight where 2 men stood face to face and hacked at each other with bladed weapons. It was not built for a stone moving faster than the eye can track. Lab tests showed that at close range, stones punched through bronze almost every time. The stone didn't need to slice. It didn't need an edge. It just needed to focus all that energy onto a contact point smaller than a fingertip. The bronze buckled inward, cracked, and the stone kept going. Goliath's armor was his pride. It was also his blind spot. He dressed for a duel. David brought something else entirely. But a weapon is only as good as the hand that wields it. And this is where the story goes deeper than most people realize. David was not a random kid who got lucky. He was a shepherd. And in Iron Age Israel, being a shepherd meant something very different from what that word means today. A shepherd in the hill country didn't just watch sheep. He defended them. Wolves, lions, jackals, bears. Every threat came from a distance. And the shepherd's first line of defense was the sling. Not a staff, not a shout, a stone, flung hard and fast, before the predator got close enough to bite. These boys started young, dawn to dusk, walking rough terrain, scanning for threats. When a jackal circled the flock, you didn't chase it. You planted your feet, loaded a stone, and put it down before it reached the herd. You had 1 shot, maybe 2. If you missed, you lost a lamb. That kind of pressure forges skill in a way no target practice ever could. By the time a shepherd reached his mid-teens, he had thrown thousands of stones under real stakes. Not for sport, for survival. David wasn't an amateur with a lucky throw. He was a trained shooter with years of fieldwork behind him. And the stones themselves tell a story. Digs across ancient Israel, have pulled thousands of sling bullets from collapsed walls and burnt rubble. What's striking is the weight. They cluster tight, with very little spread. That kind of sameness doesn't happen by accident. These weren't random rocks grabbed from a stream. They were sorted, shaped, chosen. Slingers knew that a heavier stone flew slower, but hit harder. A lighter one flew faster, but lacked punch. They found the sweet spot and stuck with it, the way a modern soldier picks a standard round. So we have a deadly weapon, a weak target, and a trained user. That should be enough. But the story has another layer that rarely gets talked about. Goliath didn't just stand there. He performed. He roared. He stomped. He called out insults that echoed off the valley walls. This wasn't anger. It was doctrine. In ancient combat, the champion's job was to break the enemy's will before the first blow landed. Modern studies back this up in a way that feels almost eerie. Put a person in a virtual room and have them face a much taller figure. Their reaction time drops. They freeze. Their hands tremble. They make worse choices. Now add sound. A war cry at painful volumes spikes the heart rate and triggers a fear response in most people. Goliath was a weapon of mind games wrapped in bronze. He didn't need to fight. He just needed the other side to believe they'd already lost. And for weeks, it worked. The Israelite army stayed on their ridge. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody even talked about stepping forward. The giant's shadow stretched farther than his spear could reach. But here's the thing about fear as a weapon. It only works if your opponent agrees to the terms. David didn't. He never planned to stand toe-to-toe. He never planned to trade blows. He planned to stay outside the range where fear lives, and the valley helped him do it. The Elah Valley isn't flat. It slopes gently, with open ground broken by limestone outcrops. On flat terrain, a slinger's useful combat range sat well beyond a spear throw. Goliath's spear, even thrown by a strong arm, couldn't close that gap. And the slope gave David even more room. A gentle downhill angle stretches the flight of a sling stone. David could move, duck behind rocks, shift angles, and stay beyond any distance where Goliath's size or spear mattered. The terrain wasn't neutral. It was an ally. And now the fight itself. Goliath lumbered forward in heavy bronze, each step pressed into loose gravel. He expected David to come closer, to draw a sword, to fight the way champions fight. Instead, the boy loaded a stone into his pouch. He swung. Once, twice. The pouch hummed as it built speed. And then the release. The stone covered the distance in under a second. It struck Goliath in the forehead, above the edge of his helmet, in the one place where no bronze scale protected him. He collapsed. Not stumbled. Collapsed. Face down in the dirt. The duel was over before it started. But if the physics and the training explain the outcome, why does every version you've ever heard make it sound like magic? That brings us to the strangest twist in this story, and it has nothing to do with weapons. It has to do with pens. The oldest surviving copies of this story don't agree on how tall Goliath was. 3 different text traditions give 3 different numbers. The oldest version puts him at a tall but plausible height. Later copies kept adding. The version most Bibles use today, copied by scribes over 1,000 years after the events, made him nearly a full meter taller than the earliest record. How does a man grow taller after he's dead? The answer is scribal drift. Hebrew numbers in ancient texts were written with letters, and some of those letters look nearly the same. A tiny stroke changes one number into another. Over the centuries, as scribes copied by hand, mistakes crept in. But these weren't always mistakes. Later editors had a reason to make Goliath bigger. The taller the giant, the more stunning the victory. The more stunning the victory, the more clearly God's hand seemed present. Scribes weren't lying. They were doing theology with a pen. Each generation nudged the number upward. And over time, a tall but real warrior became a myth-scale monster. This is where the honest view gets more complex, not less. A person of deep faith might argue that the physics don't matter, that God guided the stone, that the whole point is divine power working through weakness. And that's not a claim anyone can disprove. But consider this. What if grasping the physics doesn't shrink the story? What if it makes it bigger? A God who works through a carefully trained arm, a well-chosen stone, and a valley that tilts in your favor is not less present. That God is woven into the details, the hours of practice, the slope of the ground, the weight of the stone. Providence and skill aren't enemies. They never were. But there's a limit to this lens. Not every underdog wins. The sling edge only holds when the fight happens on open ground, at range, with room to move. Put a slinger in a narrow hallway against a shielded spearman, and everything flips. David's plan worked because every variable lined up. Terrain, distance, training, mind games, a slight change in anyone, and the story ends differently. That's not a flaw in the lesson. That's the lesson. Victory doesn't come from one trick. It comes from reading the field and choosing the right fight. Every story has a next chapter. If this one grabbed you, the next tale goes even deeper into a world you thought you knew. Subscribe so you don't miss it. A stone in a leather pouch. A boy who spent years throwing it. A valley that bent the arc in his favor. And a giant who grew taller with every copy of the scroll. The miracle was never that the stone flew true. The miracle was that someone saw the fight for what it really was.